In 2018, Marvel's Black Panther exploded into theaters as a blockbuster that celebrated African heritage and Black excellence on a scale never seen before in the genre. For many, it was the first time they saw an African nation portrayed as powerful, independent, and untouched by colonial rule. Wakanda stood as a vision of what could have been, a place of knowledge, culture, and strength guarded by its own people. Yet beneath all the beauty and imagination of Wakanda ran a story of conflict and consequence, a rivalry between two men bound by blood but divided by their pasts. King T'Challa and Eric Killmonger Stevens are cousins who grew up in opposite worlds. Through the conflict of these two men, Black Panther examines the weight of human legacy and the power of anger. It shows us how anger can become either a source of strength or a path to ruin, and how history can affect the choices each man makes. In this video, we'll take a closer look at how these two men, through their convictions and actions, taught audiences around the world about anger, responsibility, and the fragile balance between change and chaos. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy powerful movie breakdowns like this one, and let's get started. T'Challa and Eric Killmonger Stevens share royal blood, but they could not have been raised more differently. T'Challa is the son of King T'Chaka and was brought up in Wakanda, a hidden, technologically advanced African nation that escaped colonialism. Surrounded by prosperity and tradition, T'Challa grew into a man of honor and calm temperament. He wears the mantle of Black Panther with reverence, deeply committed to his people and the legacy of his ancestors. In contrast, his cousin Eric was born with the Wakandan name N'Jadaka, but grew up far from Wakanda's sheltering embrace. Eric's father, Prince Njobu, had been living undercover in Oakland, California, where he witnessed the struggles of Black Americans in impoverished communities. Njobu became disillusioned with Wakanda's isolation and sought to help oppressed Black people by arming them with Wakanda's secrets. This act was seen as treason. In a tragic turn, Njobu was killed by his own brother, King T'Chaka, to prevent a global exposure of Wakanda's vibranium resources. The young Eric was left orphaned and abandoned in America, a Wakandan prince lost in the African diaspora. Growing up in Oakland without a family or country to call his own, Eric Stevens experienced the hard reality of being a Black man in America. He went on to train as a U.S. Black Ops soldier, earning the nickname Killmonger for his lethal efficiency. All the while, he nurtured a simmering rage at the injustice he saw on the streets and the personal betrayal he suffered. To him, Wakanda's wealthy isolation was a cruel hypocrisy. His cousins lived in utopia, while people of African descent worldwide suffered poverty, racism, and oppression. T'Challa, meanwhile, never faced those struggles. Within Wakanda's borders, he never experienced racial oppression or the feeling of being a minority. His identity was shaped by being Wakandan royalty first and foremost. In Wakanda, being Black was the norm, not a cause for discrimination, so T'Challa's perspective on the outside world was initially distant. These two young men, one raised in privilege and tradition, the other in hardship and anger, embody a diaspora divided. They are two sons of Wakanda, who walk vastly different paths, each shaped by the legacies of their fathers and the worlds they grew up in. Despite their differences, T'Challa and Killmonger share common ground in personal loss. Both lost their fathers violently at a young age. T'Challa's father, King T'Chaka, was killed in a bombing. Killmonger's father was killed in a secret royal confrontation. Each man was left to grapple with a father's memory and the question of how to carry that legacy forward. Yet their responses could not be more different. T'Challa honors his father's ways and seeks to rule justly as a good king, while Eric is driven to avenge his father's death and right what he sees as generations of wrongs. Their identities were forged in two different worlds, one steeped in the richness of ancestral legacy, and the other scarred by the absence of home and the presence of systemic injustice. This contrast becomes the foundation for the ideological conflict to come. Eric Killmonger arrives in Wakanda like a force of nature. The prodigal son returned, not for reconciliation, but for reckoning. His heart burns with anger, an emotion that has defined him since childhood. This anger is intensely personal, born of the trauma of discovering his father murdered and his Wakandan family seemingly responsible. It's also profoundly historical. Killmonger's rage carries the weight of centuries of oppression felt by people of African descent. In many ways, he is the embodiment of Black historical anger. The resentment of seeing one's people exploited, marginalized, and killed without justice. This anger is pressurized until it explodes. Eric's life has been a powder keg of these grievances, and returning to Wakanda lights the fuse. When Killmonger confronts the Wakandan royal court, his fury is barely restrained. He exposes the royal family's secret shame, that King T'Challa killed his own brother, Eric's father, and left a child behind. In that moment, the pain of Eric's personal loss merges with his political outrage. He scolds the Wakandans. "Y'all sitting up here comfortable. It's about 2 billion people all over the world that looks like us. But their lives are a lot harder. Wakanda has the tools to liberate them all." This was a direct indictment. While Black communities around the globe suffered through slavery, colonization, and discrimination, Wakanda stood by in isolation, safe and unconquered, hoarding its advanced technology. Killmonger's anger is righteous in origin. He is furious at injustice, and many viewers found themselves sympathizing with his critique. After all, what could be so villainous about liberating oppressed people? Yet, even as we understand Eric's anger, we see how that anger has warped him. Killmonger's years of soldiering and loss have stripped away his mercy. He doesn't come to Wakanda seeking dialogue, he comes as a conqueror. In ritual combat, he challenges T'Challa for the throne and wins, brutally defeating the new king. The victory is more than personal revenge. It's Killmonger seizing the power he believes is necessary to ignite his global revolution. The moment he takes the throne, he gives the chilling order to burn the heart-shaped herb, the source of the Black Panther's power, ensuring that no one, including any future Wakandan kings, can follow in his footsteps. This act is symbolic of Killmonger's mindset. He isn't interested in preserving tradition or planning for a peaceful future. He wants to be the final, vengeful instrument of history. He plans to radically remake the world or die trying, with no intention of an heir or a tomorrow beyond war. In his mind, he is the rightful heir of Wakanda's power and the only one with the resolve to use it to avenge Black suffering. Under Killmonger's rule, the long-hidden armories of Wakanda spring open. He prepares to ship vibranium weapons to operatives across the globe, arming downtrodden people of color to rise against their oppressors. It's a frightening vision of a world war fueled by justified anger. However, as we watch Killmonger's plan unfold, the film forces us to question whether his cure might be as terrible as the disease. Eric has adopted the very methods of colonial oppressors in the name of justice. "The sun will never set on the Wakandan Empire," he declares triumphantly, echoing the old boast of the British Empire at the height of colonialism. In his fury, he is willing to turn Wakanda into an imperial conqueror itself. This is the great irony and tragedy of Killmonger. His anger is valid, but it drives him to become what he hates. While Killmonger storms into Wakanda with the fire of a revolutionary, T'Challa must grapple with the weight of legacy, a weight that grows heavier with each revelation. As the new king, T'Challa initially seeks to follow in his father, King T'Challa's footsteps. Wakanda has thrived for centuries by keeping to its traditions and isolating itself from a dangerous world. T'Challa has been taught to preserve this legacy, protect Wakanda at all costs, keep its technological wonders secret, and continue the royal lineage of Black Panthers, who rule justly at home but remain hidden from outsiders. He is a good man who wants to be a good king, and in his mind, That meant upholding his father's ways. But the legacy he inherited is not a spotless one. When Killmonger arrives and truths are unveiled, T'Challa is forced to confront the sins of his father and of Wakanda's past. The discovery that his father killed his own brother in Jobu, and worse, left his young nephew behind in America, is a soul-shaking shock for T'Challa. It shatters the idealized image he had of King T'Chaka as an honorable and infallible leader. Suddenly, T'Challa sees the cracks in the foundation of the legacy he is trying to uphold. In Wakandan tradition, each king, each Black Panther, communes with the ancestors for guidance. When T'Challa undergoes the ceremonial process to visit the ancestral plane, he expects comfort and wisdom from his departed father. Instead, he finds turmoil in his own heart. Later in the film, after Killmonger's victory, a wounded T'Challa revisits the ancestral plane in a desperate bid for strength and direction. There, he confronts the spirit of T'Chaka and the line of Wakandan kings, breaking down in anguish and anger. In a powerful emotional moment, T'Challa rejects the easy path of his forefathers. He looks at the spirits of previous kings, including the father he still loves, and delivers a searing rebuke. "You were wrong! All of you were wrong. To turn your backs on the rest of the world. We let the fear of discovery stop us from doing what is right." In that charged confrontation, T'Challa acknowledges that Wakanda's mistakes, their abandonment of the outside world, and of Eric himself, created the vengeful enemy now tearing at their nation. With sadness and fury, T'Challa vows to right these wrongs. This moment marks T'Challa's transformation. He realizes that being a truly great leader means not always following ancestral tradition, especially if that tradition was built on isolation and secrecy that enabled suffering elsewhere. T'Challa's father had once told him that it's hard for a good man to be king. Indeed, King T'Chaka believed that doing what was necessary for the throne might conflict with moral goodness, a justification perhaps for the cruel choice he made with his brother. T'Challa, however, refuses to accept that trade-off. He decides he will not choose between being a good man and a good king. He will be both, forging a path that honors the core of Wakanda's values while also embracing change. This is the burden of T'Challa's legacy, to carry forward all that is noble about his people's history, their wisdom, courage, and unity, but also to break the cycle of their isolation and complacency. With T'Challa's newfound resolve and Killmonger's revolutionary fervor, Black Panther drives toward an epic confrontation that is both physical and ideological. On one side is T'Challa, fighting not just to reclaim his throne, but to uphold a more righteous vision of what that throne should stand for. On the other side is Killmonger, fighting to shatter centuries of tradition and enact his fiery form of justice. Their battle is intense and personal, cousin against cousin, almost like brothers locked in combat. But it is also symbolic. It's a collision between two mindsets about how to use power and how to heal or avenge the wounds of history. The battle for Wakanda that erupts is visually stunning. Royal guards and tribes divided in civil war, high-tech armor and ancestral rhinos charging into the fray. But beneath the spectacle, the moral debate rages. As T'Challa and Killmonger trade blows, they trade ideals too. T'Challa appeals to the goodness still within Eric, trying to make him see reason and spare Wakanda from destruction. Killmonger, however, is past hearing. To him, this is the culmination of his life's mission. There's too much pain driving him to relent now. He sneers at the thought of compromise or mercy. If he must burn down the old world to free the new, so be it. For Killmonger, violence is the master's tongue he was taught to speak, and he knows no other language to achieve justice. T'Challa, having learned from his father's errors, tries to dissuade Eric from this path of becoming the very thing they both despise. "I learn from my enemies," Killmonger shouts, refusing to yield. "You have become them," T'Challa responds in sorrow. In a few words, T'Challa exposes the tragic paradox of Killmonger's revolution. By using the oppressor's tactics of fear and domination, Killmonger would only create a new tyranny, not true freedom. Ultimately, T'Challa gains the upper hand in combat, but notably, he does not revel in Killmonger's defeat. As the spear strike lands and Eric falls, we see no triumph on T'Challa's face, only anguish and empathy. The king, who was once ready to kill his father's killer in revenge, now shows mercy to his fiercest enemy. T'Challa's growth is evident in this moment. He is victorious, yet his first act is not to execute the villain or celebrate. Instead, he kneels beside the wounded Killmonger with concern and regret. Here, in the quiet aftermath of battle, Black Panther delivers its most emotional lesson. Killmonger, breathing heavily, knows his life is ebbing. T'Challa, ever compassionate, offers a chance at healing. "We can still heal you," he says sincerely, not wanting his cousin to die. But for Eric, survival would mean submission, likely imprisonment in a Wakandan cell. And that is a life worse than death. With the last of his strength, Killmonger refuses, uttering the powerful final words that stunned audiences worldwide. "Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage." His voice is filled with defiance and pride, even in defeat. In this gut-wrenching line, Killmonger links himself to the millions of African slaves who died in the Atlantic, choosing to drown rather than live enslaved. He is claiming that same legacy of resistance in death. As Eric takes his final breaths, T'Challa is left holding not only a dying man, but the weight of all that anger and suffering that died with him. The clash of ideals ends not with a cheer, but with a somber reflection. Through Killmonger's death, Black Panther pointedly refuses a fairy tale ending. After all, there is no easy resolution to the real-world trauma that he represented. Instead, the film leaves us with a lingering question. How do we honor righteous anger and pain without perpetuating the cycles of violence? The answer lies in what T'Challa chooses to do next. T'Challa understands now that Killmonger's anger came from something real. His cousin's rage was twisted by pain, but T'Challa understood the message. Wakanda could not stay silent while the rest of the world suffered. So T'Challa decides to act. He travels to Oakland, the place where Killmonger grew up without a father, and transforms the old apartment building into a Wakandan outreach center. Standing in the same neighborhood his cousin once called home, T'Challa opens Wakanda's doors to the world for the first time. That choice turns anger into purpose. Killmonger's fury becomes the spark that pushes Wakanda toward unity and responsibility. The film leaves us with a powerful lesson about emotion and legacy. Anger can destroy if it controls you, but it can also heal if it drives you to do better. T'Challa learns to build where Killmonger wanted to burn. He creates a new legacy rooted in compassion, leadership, and accountability. In the end, both men leave their mark. Killmonger forces Wakanda to see its silence as a form of betrayal, and T'Challa ensures that silence never returns. If you enjoyed this movie analysis, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Black Wealth Uncut, where we break down the lessons hidden in our culture, media, and history. Watch more of our videos to keep building knowledge, power, and wealth the way our ancestors dreamed, through truth and purpose. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.